On to our next speaker, which is Corinne Latham. Corinne is the Director of Curriculum and Assessment at CCEA and former Principal at Seaview Primary School in Belfast. Corinne is going to talk about embracing educational vulnerability. Corinne, are you there?
Okay, no worries. Now, the reason why I normally wear headphones is because I have a dog. So if the dog starts barking, I apologize. My talk tonight is really about embracing educational vulnerability. And it was really good to hear the last speaker talk so passionately about our children and young people. Over the past 20 months, we have seen many challenges in our system because of COVID, but it's also presented many opportunities. For me, it has exposed further our inequalities and educational vulnerability within the system. And I suppose for those of you who don't understand educational vulnerability, it is when children are a little bit out at sea. Educational vulnerability refers to individuals experiencing a number of marked difficulties. And you heard Noel say about the 27% of children in Northern Ireland who are living in poverty. Nearly 28% are entitled to free school meals, and a fifth of our school population identify as children with special educational needs. Throughout their school career, these difficulties present them from capitalising on the curriculum and teaching in the classroom. Now, one of the things that I have noticed over lockdown not only has been inequalities, but it's also been people starting to do this paddleboard. And I'm going to tell you about one of my most vulnerable moments. You see, I am a little bit visually challenged, and like many people in Northern Ireland, thought I would take to paddleboarding. You know, I got on the paddleboard. I looked as if I could have been in an Instagram post, our beautiful scenery here in Northern Ireland. And all of a sudden, my stance was good, my posture was good, but the grip and stroke were maybe not so good. And lo and behold, I fell off the paddleboard. My glasses fell into the water. What I was doing paddleboarding with my glasses on, I'm not sure, but it left me feeling really vulnerable. I should also mention that whilst I love the water, I'm not a great swimmer. You see, vulnerability is a word that is often associated with weakness. And in that moment, I felt weak. And one of the things that I'm not really great at sometimes is asking for help. But vulnerability is one of the times where you do need courage. And I really needed the courage to ask for help to get back on that paddleboard because I couldn't see and I can't swim very well. And Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability is actually probably one of the most accurate measurements of courage. And it's through this analogy that I'm going to talk to you tonight about our children and our young people as we move into the future and do something Brené Brown would do. It's called creating daring classrooms. You see, as teachers, we need to adopt a different stance to enable recovery. We need to create classroom environments where it feels like a safe space. We need to cultivate those emotional connections where children feel that they can trust us and we respect them and they respect us. We need to think about our posture. Now, for so many months, we were told to keep our distance and not go near them in case we ended up with COVID. But we now need to think about teaching authentically and moving beyond the classroom desk. We really do need to get a grip of our pupils. We need to be professional, obviously, in the way we conduct ourselves, but also we need to position ourselves in the correct fashion. Those of you who know anything about paddleboarding will know that if your grip on the paddle isn't secure, it can fall into the water very easily. And that grip and that stance enable you to get your stroke right. And as you pull with your paddle into the water, you start to move forward. And we do need to teach authentically in order to enable our children and young people to move forward. We do have a lot of vulnerable children in our system. And as Noel says, they deserve so much more. And as we get that stroke right, we start to think about our core. Now, in order to get up onto the paddleboard, you do need to have a really good core set of muscles. And I suppose in a classroom scenario, we do need a core of our own responsibility, but wider than that, we need the core of our hearts to enable our children and young people to know us. We have to let our guard down. We have to be able to share some of the stories of life. Brené Brown talks about being guardians of a space and creating that space so that we can allow our students to breathe and be curious, but also to remember that our classrooms are those safe spaces where children can communicate their behaviours. And they deserve one place where they can rumble with vulnerability and so that their hearts can exhale. You know, the past 20 months has been so challenging and so difficult for so many reasons. And vulnerability is best within the context of a supportive community. And when times are tough, it is that community that helps children and young people acknowledge some of those difficulties where they feel vulnerable. As teachers, you are the core. And with that in mind, we also have had the challenge of riding the waves. Over the past 20 months, not only have we been encouraged to ride the waves, some of us may have felt that we've fallen off the paddleboard. Maybe we felt like we were drowning. Some of us maybe just got on with it and embraced the challenge. But let's be honest, no experience has been the same. And as our pace in life, I think it's become a little bit slower. Our classrooms have had to reflect and pick up what has been going on in these young people's lives. We've had to learn to read the room. What do they really need from us? They need us to create that safe space. They need us to compress those lessons that they maybe missed out on so that they have quality teaching and learning, where the structure of our lessons is very much personalized to the pupil, and that we use this opportunity to reimagine how we assess children and young people. Our questioning in our classrooms has to be more compassionate. Our pace has to be more pupil-driven. And when we truly understand Maslow before Bloom's, we learn to love first and to teach second. Humans need other humans. And as teachers, we bring ourselves, we bring our emotions, and we bring those attributes into a very busy sea of other things going on. And as we look to the horizon, we need to remember that we need to be the best that we can be. Sir John Jones writes a book called The Magic Weaving Business, where he recognizes teachers who make such a difference in the lives of so many young people. He notes the ones that turn up, that go the extra mile, whose eyes actually smile when they're looking at a pupil. The ones who in 20 years' time will actually remember them by name and be able to meet them on the street and share that really funny story that happened one day in their classroom. You see, the teachers who embrace vulnerability and understand the power of human connection, who compassionately question, who show that they really care, are the teachers who give and connect on a human level. Half our lives are spent in our classrooms. We'll have some of our best days there, and equally, we may have some of our worst. But as we look to the horizon to enable recovery, we need to move ourselves from behind the desk. We need to be willing to be vulnerable. We need to make our classrooms those safe spaces where it's okay to be imperfect, to make mistakes, but also in that safe space to be coached and mentored to learn and grow from them. We need to create I can classrooms where we champion pupil creativity and innovation. Carol Duke's work on the growth mindset highlighted that a willingness is needed to accept failures and mistakes as part of the learning process. And the children who tend to do the best are children who are educationally vulnerable. We need to do better. We need to remind our pupils that their failures are not barriers, that things that are maybe happening at home or events that have occurred over the past 20 months aren't going to shape their future. Everybody falls off a paddleboard, but in the end, you have a choice to make. You can either get up or you can not shout for help. Being vulnerable requires courage. You are our children's life jackets. You are the paddleboard coach. You are the lifeguard. And as we kind of come to the close, I want us to remind you that one of the main reasons that teaching is so challenging is that it causes all of us to be deeply vulnerable. In moving forward and looking ahead, may we all be good paddleboarders. Some of us may go in the water, others will use our classrooms to stand up for our young people. But I hope that we all continue to embrace those children who are educationally vulnerable and build that legacy through stimulating learning and growth in our classrooms. And for us as teachers, we need to unleash those passions of our subjects, our first loves, and remember why you became a teacher. And then think about adopting the correct stance, the posture, the grip, the stroke to prepare our young children and move them forward. We need to preserve our own health. None of us can fill from an empty bucket. Our children and young people need the best version of you every day, showing up for them. And as we prepare to embrace educational vulnerability, let me close with this final quote. Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And look what we have achieved over the past 18 months. As the Minister has already highlighted, look how well we've done with blended learning, centre-determined grades, and collaboration. Teachers, you have been the cornerstone of so many aims in terms of recovery, and you have moved our communities forward. Let's continue to embrace that legacy and think positively about our children and young people's future. Thank you.
Corinne, thank you so much. I'm also say that I paddleboard for the first time this summer and ended up out at sea. So I could have used your 4-point plan to get back to shore a bit easier than I did.